party, so that's nice. We don't have to decorate. But we're so glad to have you here tonight. Thank you for coming. And Rusty and Luella usually come. I hadn't heard that they weren't, and we know Kristen's on her way, so hopefully a few more are going to trickle in here. But we're going to go ahead and get started because it is already, it looks like it's 6:05, so I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to go ahead and open us in a prayer, if you'll just bow with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this beautiful day. We thank you for all the blessings in our lives. You are just so good and kind and generous, and you just take such good care of us, and we are so grateful. This is the month that everybody kind of thinks about, really thinking about Thanksgiving and all the things we're thankful for. And so we're thankful for our wonderful city here, the city of Gulf Breeze. We're thankful for family and friends, and we're thankful for the Historic Society. And we're thankful for everyone who's here tonight. Just give them a special blessing. And we love you so much, and we pray always in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay, and I'd like to ask Jim Cox to come up, and he's going to lead us. The rest of you can stand. He's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, which the flag is over here.
This is a real pleasure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Jim. And Jim is just an amazing volunteer. He comes to almost every meeting, and he's often over at the Benson House helping Rusty. And he's just been a great asset, and we thank you so much, Jim. Okay, well, Betty, I'm going to have you come up, and Betty's going to introduce our speaker tonight in our program.
You know, I'm so glad, because I thought I needed to redeem myself from last month, and then when I saw myself on the thing, I wasn't totally embarrassed with you.
No, you were good.
Anyway, it's crazy. I'm getting old, and everybody notices it, and I've just finished with 3 weeks of illness, which did not make me stronger, but I'll get it back. I have no intentions of dying anytime soon. I would like to welcome Ivy Burrows here tonight and thank her so much for taking over for Wesley Odom. He told me you were wonderful, and I've already found out by talking to you that you are. Ivy is a Gulf Coast native. She was born and reared in Fort Walton Beach area, so that's just next door. And she attended college at the University of West Florida, where she obtained degrees in archaeology and art administration. That's impressive to me. Archaeology, that's really impressive. Burrows has a passion for history, which translated into an internship, followed by a job with the University of Historic Trust. And we're going to have a trust guy come and talk to us later on this year. Now she's an employee of Go Retro, where she puts all her skills and her public, and working with the public and with the knowledge of what those trips are all about. And that's one thing I wouldn't mind taking, some of those trips, and I hope you'll share some that with us tonight that we could take. Because I quite frankly, I met Wesley at a party, but what's her name down there took me to, and in fact, she invited me to this meeting, and I said, well, where is it? And she said, 825 Bayshore Drive. That's where I live, in Pensacola. I said, that's where I live. She said, oh, okay, well, you just have to go down the stairs then. So she came over, and we had a great meeting, and Wesley had furnished all the drinks and food for that. So I got to meet him and his girlfriend, and they were super nice. But when he told me you were going to take his place, he told me you were super nice as well. So we'll welcome you.
Well, he only fibs a little.
Thank you so much for coming.
I promise he only fibbed a tiny bit. I'm feisty, but I am nice. But you keep talking about you want to do some tours, so while I'm talking, since you guys are the Historical Society, I figure you know probably most of, or at least a So I'm gonna ask a couple questions like our trivia does on our tour. If you get them right, I got some passes for some of those tours. So Wesley wanted to make sure to bribe you guys to come check out our tours a little bit. So I work for Go Retro. It was founded in 2013, and we do a bunch of different tours. We do general, we do groups, we do private events. You can even rent our buses out. Actually, we just helped Cat Country out with their turkey run this year. So that took all day for one of our blessed little sweet tour guides. He ran from about 6 a.m. to about 5 p.m. running turkeys all over Pensacola. So he had a long day, but we have things like our Naval Heritage Tour, which actually allows you to go on to base, one of the few things you can't do nowadays. But we have tour guides who actually were former military, so they are able to actually take people with them onto base. So we take you to the Lighthouse and the Aviation Museum. And the Aviation Museum will give you a guided tour, and then we'll let you kind of wander off on your own for about a good hour and a half, or maybe an hour, give or take. We're even getting to a point now where we're going to add in free admission to one of the movies on top of that ticket. So that's going to be a fun little thing that we're going to do. We also do hop-on, hop-off tours, which take you all around downtown Pensacola, show you some of the major highlights. We get you some free gelato over at Joe Patty's. We get you some sweets over at J.W. Renfro's. We even give you a pass to get in free to the Historic Village and all of the museums, because under the umbrella of the Historic Trust, their ticket counts for everything. And it's good for 7 days, so if you get bored, you just go back. We also do things like Pensacola Day Pass, which gets you into the Aviation Museum, the Lighthouse, the museums, all the hop-off, hop-on locations, the Dolphin Cruise, and our ghost tours. Now, the ghost tours are my baby. I do them quite often. They are my favorite. I know more ghost stories in Pensacola than are just on the tour, so I tend to give a little extras here and there as well, because I've worked in quite a few of the haunted locations down in Pensacola, including the Children's Museum, which is one of my favorite stories. You'd never think a children's museum used to be a Gulf saloon and have a body found in the wall. So we also stop at St. John Cemetery during the ghost tour, and we take people to a private residence, pending that the owners are available for the night. And they'll actually take people into the house and let you tour around the house on the first floor and tell you some of the experiences that they've had in that building. So we got quite a few different things going on. We're actually building up on trying to possibly do our Christmas lights tour this year. We're not sure if we're going to do it yet or not. It kind of depends on how the season goes. We couldn't do it last year. And we're talking about whether we can actually open back up our beach tours, which would bring people back over here as well to Fort Pickens and to the beaches. So we're hoping to possibly be able to open that one back up to the public as well, pending, pandemic issues. But to get into my little trivia and history, anybody know about the Battle of Santa Rosa Island?
Say it again.
Battle of Santa Rosa Island?
I know, I've heard.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 1861, the Confederates actually took living situation on Deer Point, which of course is the southern point of Gulf Breeze, and it faces Santa Rosa Island. They took that point by General Bragg's orders, and basically the Pensacola Guard was assigned to boat duty, and a few of them were also on Deer Point. Deer Point was occupied at one point by 800 to 900 Floridians and Confederate, and that was the most at the time that had actually inhabited Gulf Breeze. That was the highest number that Gulf Breeze had seen yet at that point. So the Confederates were actually using rowboats to go back and forth to Deer Point in the cover of night, trying to be sneaky little boys. Well, unfortunately, Union sentries spotted them, and the Federals got a hold of that information. So the next morning, the Federals had a little bit of a surprise for the Confederates. They, before the crack of dawn, lined up a couple warships pointed at Deer Point. Confederates only were armed with muskets. They woke up to being rained upon by battlements. Needless to say, they hightailed it out of there, got in their boats, and ran for safety. General Bragg said, "You're going back tonight." And the Confederates did not want to. They said, "We are scared. They just rained all kinds of artillery down on us. We got muskets. We don't want to go back." Well, General Bragg said, "I'll tell you what. Go back, but take cannons with you." So next thing you know, there's cannons up on the battlements, and the Federals went, we're not doing that again. So the Federals left them alone. They actually stayed at Deer Point because they were trying to stop the Union from kind of moving into that area, and they were also giving themselves an opportunity to try to attack the Federals, you know, have a good vantage point. But they eventually moved out when the rest of the Confederates moved along as well in about 1862, and they evacuated the whole site. So that was a nice little entry point for Gulf Breeze and Pensacola still trying to defend. And granted, it was Confederates, but we're the South, we're always going to hold on to our history on that one. So just like Fort Pickens and, you know, Fort Barranca's always fought, Deer Point was a good little vantage point in the beginning of a war on there. So another thing that happened about 10 years later, anybody know about Dead Man's Island? Yeah. Exactly. So Dead Man's Island is a particular favorite of mine, and I thought it was fascinating that it was a quarantine station and that they, you know, fumigated the ships there. But does anybody know why it's called Dead Man's Island?
Because people were buried there that died.
Surprisingly, no.
No?
Dead Man's Island, from what I've been reading and from the scholars and the things that I've actually been able to catch up on, actually has nothing to do with death. Even though there's, you know, unmarked graves, they found, or huge burials, there's a ship graveyard, they found unearthed coffins, it actually doesn't have to do anything with death. It goes back to the shipyard days. So a dead man was a post that was put in maritime language up on the beach, and it helped lift the wooden ships partially out of the water. And that post was called a dead man. The island was one of those locations where they would put a lot of those back when Port of Pensacola and Gulf Breeze were extremely active.
As much as I read about that, I have not read that.
I stumbled across it while doing research for this. I hadn't heard of a dead man either. I completely stumbled across it.
That's up there on that thing.
I'm not sure. It was a maritime thing that I came across, and I was like, so that's what a dead man is. I was with you. I thought it was because of all the death and the quarantine and the mourning of the dead and the great shipyard grave. Nope. Apparently there was a big thing about, since the Spanish, the French, and the British all used it as a shipyard, they called it a dead man's island because that's where the dead man post was.
Oh.
But did you also know that there was the steam-powered ship in 1888, the steam-powered plant to fix all of the boats?
I didn't.
Yeah. So Dead Man's Island actually had a steam-powered plant in 1888. They had a glue factory in 1906, and they had a fertilizer plant in 1919. All in basically the same location.
You're going to leave that speech with me, aren't you?
I happily will leave the speech with you. You can have all of my
Because I'm a
notes.
historian, I want to know that.
Absolutely. I'll even see if I can come up with where I found the information for you, and I'll email it to you. During the railway years, it also became the graveyard for a lot of the ships. So they became a great ship graveyard as well. So there's a lot of death, but it actually was because of the post. But now the restoration project is actually going on, and they're trying to save the shoreline because it is very quickly deteriorating, which is something from an archaeological standpoint I can appreciate, because there's a few locations in the area that we try not to actually excavate, because speaking from an archaeologist's point of view, even if we find the site, even if it's extremely pertinent, we try not to touch it, because the second you excavate it, you lose it. There's no putting it back and relearning what you pull up. So the more we can wait, the better it is. So the next thing, we were laughing about this when I came in because I said I was going to bring it up. So who's into UFOs?
Yay.
I was like, huh, they talked about this already. So yeah, I did a little bit of research on UFOs. I found out about Mr. Ed Walters. Who can name one of his books for me?
Oh gosh, I have it back here in my.
No, I didn't know it. I thought he only had one.
Actually, he has two.
UFO era?
I think that's one of them. Yeah, so I'll give you one of the cards. Now, did you know that there was a more recent sighting as well in 2019?
No.
Actually, if you go on to Where TV, you can actually find it. It was a Mr. George Sheldon. He witnessed a bright flashing light up in the sky, and he caught it on his cell phone. And he said that it illuminated the clouds, and that he was fairly certain that it was not a military vessel, that it was just this bright, pulsing light orb up in the sky. He talked to Wear TV about it, and that was in 2019. So apparently even the aliens like to come here on vacation because they keep doing it. But there were comments from all kinds of people in the area talking about they've seen light orbs flying past with jets chasing them. I wish I could see that video. I'd love to see that one. But it's amazing how many UFO sightings and things like that have been spotted in the area, but how few video and pictures we have. So who was it? Does anybody know who it was that actually discovered the model up in Walter's attic? Manser family, you'll get the other pass. So I am torn personally on this because I find it a little convenient that you move out of your house and you're going to leave the model up in the attic that you apparently used for this big to-do for so many years. Seems a little convenient to me. Plus, double exposure with the film that he used was very difficult to do. I played with it a little bit with photography myself because, you know, digging things up out of the ground, you kind of have to take good pictures of where they're located so that you can record them and document them. And even the old Polaroid pictures and things like that, it's almost impossible to double exposure them. And digital cameras nowadays too, you can't really double exposure them. You can play with them in photo edit, but you can't double exposure things. So
I never quite understood what double exposure was, and I did a lot of reading.
So double exposure, you would take a negative, you would take the picture, and then you would expose it to another negative, so it almost double layers the picture.
Ah.
So you almost got two pictures on one piece of paper exposed. So it's literally making two pictures into one. You're just using the same piece of paper. But yeah, I tend to kind of believe Mr. Walters. Does anybody know some of the bigger people who actually backed him up?
Yeah, we had Art Hubbard who spoke to us last month, and he really felt that well, I got the impression he really felt that Walters
Was telling the truth.
And he went through several, he was subjected to testing, like lie detector test and so forth. So he really, in fact, I don't know if you picked it up with you, but I wrote a huge article. It's in the middle, I think page 5 or something, and you got received today. And it's,
All about
what he.
Yeah. I found it interesting that a council member, a newspaper publisher, a doctor, a chemical engineer, they all backed him up. You know, these weren't, Uncle Jim from Timbuktu out in the middle of nowhere that sits in the cornfield all day saying, I saw a UFO and it took me up in a spaceship. These were major players of the community backing him up and saying, yeah, we saw it too. So I found that very interesting. But the fact that another one happened in 2019 and that Wear TV covered it caught my attention. And I keep wondering when we're going to start seeing them over in Pensacola. I keep watching the skies thinking, but it's kind of hard to see the night sky with all those lights. So.
A lot of the reporters, though, got treated very badly when they reported those things by the mayor at that time here and Guthries and other people. Because, of course, those people in charge did not want Guthries to be known as
The UFO spot.
Exactly. I thought it was
Exactly.
kind of nice myself.
I thought it was fascinating doing all the research, reading up, because I was trying to find points to talk about. I didn't know y'all would already have the expert in here on that one. I would have gone the route of the ghost stories if I had known that. But I will give you a ghost story, and I'll actually tell you the one of the Children's Museum, because it does tie into both Breeze and Milton as well. So the Arvana building, which is where the Children's Museum is currently located, was owned by Fanny and Eugenio Arvana. And it was in the early 1800s. It was known as the Gulf Saloon. And Fanny was an absolute genius of a businesswoman. She actually bought one of the very first refrigerators in the area. So she was known for having the coldest beer, which of course is going to make you popular in the 1800s because cold beer versus warm beer, what you go to breed for. Eugenio was a little flighty. He would hang around and sit there and talk, and then he would disappear and go away for a couple months at end. He actually at one point ended up in prison for murder and was let back out because they never found the body. But he would disappear, come back, disappear, come back. At one point he decided that the saloon was an absolute money pit. He was done, he was over it. He looks at Fanny and says, "You want this thing?" She goes, "Yeah, I want a divorce too, get out." So she did. She divorced him. She took over the business. Her and her son ran it. They actually ran moonshine all the way over here to Gulf Breeze, to Milton, to a lot of places in the area. But they used Eugenio's initials on the bottles because nobody really wants to buy from a woman during the time period. And at some point during that time, Eugenio wanders back after one of his many excursions, and he goes, "Wow, you're making a lot of money. I want the business back." Well, of course, Fanny being the feisty the woman that she is, I could see you taking over little Miss Fanny's operations. She told him exactly where he could put that idea. And Eugenio disappears again. Months and months and months down the road, people start wondering, "Fanny, where's Eugenio? We haven't seen him for a while." And she goes, "Well, he was so distraught after I told him he couldn't have the business back that he went back to Spain and himself." Nobody questioned it. They were just like, he's flighty enough, he would do something like that. Miss Fanny lived out her days. She's actually buried in St. Michael's Cemetery, which is a big deal because she wasn't Catholic. And to be in St. Michael's, you either had to be Catholic or really high elite. Well, many decades later, they go to expand the Arvana building and make it a little bit bigger, and they find a male skeleton in the wall with obvious stab wounds. So we kind of figured out what happened to Eugenio. So centuries later, or I should say century later, I'm actually working in the Children's Museum. We had to start a routine working there where we would take pictures to show that we had cleaned up at night, that we had put everything back where it belonged, and that we had done our jobs. Specifically because things tend to move at night in the Children's Museum. They don't even wait till nighttime. I was actually closing one night at the Children's Museum, had put all of the little wooden bowling pins away, put all the toys up, went to greet my coworker at the door because he was going to help me clean upstairs. I turn around. In the center of the room, there is a big pirate ship. It's a big open space, big play area. There's no kids down there with me. They're all upstairs. I turn around. All those bowling pins I had put back up were all on the corners of the pirate ship, strategically placed, teetering on the edge of the corners. I looked at him, my coworker, and I was like, "You see that, right?" And he goes, "Uh-huh." I was like, "All right, I'm putting these back. Please leave them where I put them. I want to go home." So Eugenio's still there. He's still playing with things, and he particularly doesn't like the elevator. We had a lot of issues with that not working. So yeah, even the ghost stories tie Pensacola and Gulf Breeze together because Fanny did a lot of business in Gulf Breeze and a lot of business in Milton running all of that moonshine. So I don't know if that's a good tie in moonshine with Pensacola, but it is a tie between the two. So does anybody have any questions? Want me to tell any other ghost stories or?
What the house that you said if the people are home, you could go in it. Is that the one where the people play cards and stuff?
Yes, actually. So it was known as the. It's called the House of Pain on the Haunted Collector. It was actually I can't remember what year it was aired on, but it was on the Haunted Collector. I believe it's on Gonzales Street, if I remember correctly. I drive it in my head. I look for landmarks rather than street names. But they have seen children playing cards in the drawing room downstairs. They have seen apparitions above the son's bed upstairs. I personally have been in that house a couple of times. I was petting their wonderful little security system named Cheese, who is a Spanish Spaniel. I'm sorry. She's a Tibetan Spaniel. She has a wonderful underbite. She's so funny. But she is a mop. She just flops and stays there. I felt what I thought was Cheese brushing against my leg, wanting attention. I reached down to pet her and realized she's over there. And I was like, the other dog's outside. I don't know what just brushed my leg, but something wanted my attention. They have had so many experiences in that house. Light switches flicking up and down by itself. The mother-in-law actually saw what she thought was the soon-to-be stepdaughter walking down the hall and asked why she hadn't been introduced yet. The stepdaughter was at her father's house, and she wasn't even in the home, and it was a full body, she thought a person had just walked down the hall. So that house is a little active. So when we're lucky and they're available, we go in and they'll tell some of the stories and some of the experiences, and they've got a few different stories to tell as well. So that one's probably one of the more active on the Ghost and Graveyards tour. And of course we visit Miss Molly McCoy's grave over in St. John's, and she was the Madam of Pensacola. And she brought a lot of business from a lot of areas, but she actually had to have her gravestone removed at one point because we don't know if it was angry wives or just too many paramours coming to visit her after she died. But her gravestone was actually removed at one point and then eventually put back. But it's one way to be popular, I suppose.
Like the Pensacola Day Pass, you know, that was one of them. What's the cost of it?
So the Day Pass is one of our more expensive ones. That's $100, but it is 3 days.
Oh.
So, and it covers the Aviation Museum, the Lighthouse, basically the entire hop-on, hop-off tour, all the museums, the ghost tour, and the dolphin cruise. I'm not sure if the dolphin cruise is something you can hold on to and wait till season, because I think they're out of season at the moment. But yeah, that is our bigger one, but it's for the price of it and what you get out of it, it is definitely worth it.
Do you know anything about the Lear House ever being haunted?
I adore the Lear House.
My grandmother lived there.
Really?
She and her 4 sisters and my great-grandmother lived in one room.
Oh, wow.
Of the Lear House, yeah.
So the Lear House was built in 1890, and the way the tour is done for the Historic Society right now is they have it as the 1920s boarding house that I believe Miss Emily Snowden ran, and they kind of walk you through, and it's a guided tour only because there are artifacts on full display, and we always tell people, look with your eyes, keep your hands in your pockets, because even the tour guides are not allowed to touch things in that house. They can explain to you what it is, they can give you an idea of what it's about, but even they're not allowed to touch. And they're eventually working on making the second floor a speakeasy women's rights display. So I don't know when that's going to be open, but they're working on that.
But do you know if there's any word of it, any ghost hauntings?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. A little girl
definitely.
is seen quite often. We've had many tours where people have gone, a little girl's outside and want to be let in, and so the tour guide will go and open the door and there's absolutely nobody on the porch. I've stood in the dining room and children's feet make a very distinct tapping noise on wood floors. I heard children's feet run through the dining room as I'm standing there talking to my coworkers, and I'm like, y'all's feet are too big to make that noise. What was that?
One other on Government Street, George Markham and Sun Signs, they're on Barrancas now, and now where they were on Government is a lawyer's office, and I stopped by one time because the guy was going to his car, and he gave me his card and said anytime I wanted to come, but I experienced a ghost on that property, and there's been write-ups about our family with
Intendencia is a good street too.
Intendencia.
Intendencia was actually the funeral home street. And my favorite running joke about Intendencia is, what did shops do when they wanted to show off their wares? They put them in the windows, right? What do funeral homes do when embalming became a thing? Uncle Bob looked real good in that window for a while.
Oh my God.
They did. They actually would put bodies in the windows and show off their embalming skills. But also on Intendencia Street, there are quite a few different houses that have history of hauntings and things like that. My favorite was poor Miss Stella Bedgood. It was the bloodiest murder of 1936. She ran a hostel, and she was estranged from her second husband, and she tended to keep the company of married men. And one of them, her favorite for a little while, was Mr. Anthony, and I can't remember his last name off the top of my head. But eventually she got tired of him, threw him to the wayside, and moved on to the next flavor of the month, and he didn't take too kindly to that. And he showed up at her house about 2:30 in the morning, walked up to the room that she was sharing with her 4-year-old son, and started slicing her to ribbons with a razor blade. Son woke up, screamed, other people in the house ran to try to stop him. He, disarmed them, took them down, walked over to her, and almost severed her head completely. Her spinal column was the only thing holding her head on. He set down the razor blade, walked down the stairs, and very calmly went back home to his wife and 7 children.
Wow.
He never saw trial. They kept trying to send him to trial. Everybody saw it. They knew he did it. There was witnesses. There was no way to say he was innocent. But he kept saying he was sick, kept saying he was sick. Finally, the grand jury said, we're not waiting anymore. You're going to trial. That Monday, he died of a heart attack.
Wow.
So he never saw trial for murder. So that one is quite an active house as well. I think it is a technology company or a computer company now. But just walking past it, I find it interesting because they have rosemary bushes planted in front, and rosemary is said to calm spirits. And they have a lot of rosemary bushes planted in front. I've never seen so many rosemary bushes planted in one place at a time. But, yeah. Any other questions? I can tell stories all day, trust me.
Love it, love it, I love it.
We thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Give Ivy a round of applause.
You're welcome.
That should be fun to do a trip, a group trip,
Thank
you know?
Of course.
Absolutely. Glad you guys enjoyed it.
You tell, Wesley that we were super pleased with your performance.